We come in peace, seeking dialogue with the human government. A long pause followed. Zelnar could almost feel the skepticism radiating through the communication channel. The Concordat, the voice finally replied, after 300 years of silence. Interesting timing. Zelnar took a deep breath. We face extinction. The entire galaxy is under threat from a force called the Void Harbingers. They destroy everything in their path, and our weapons cannot stop them. We seek your assistance. Another pause, longer this time. Transmit your ship's identification and prepare to be escorted through the barrier. Any deviation from the prescribed course will result in immediate destruction. The barrier parted before them, revealing a star system much changed from the ancient records. The human homeworld was there, blue and vibrant, but it was now surrounded by massive orbital structures. Defensive platforms dotted the approach like artificial moons, each one capable of tracking the luminous path with weapons Zelnar sensors couldn't even classify. Their escort was a small vessel, sleek and dark, that appeared silently alongside them. It guided them toward a station in high orbit around Earth, a massive structure of interlocking rings that rotated slowly, generating its own gravity. As they docked, Zelnar prepared herself for the first face-to-face meeting with a human in 3 centuries. The historical records showed them as bipedal mammals, relatively short-lived but remarkably adaptable. The Concordat had feared them for their unpredictability, their capacity for both great violence and startling innovation. The airlock cycled open, and Zelnar found herself face-to-face with a delegation of 3 humans. They were taller than she had expected, clad in dark uniforms with insignia she didn't recognize. The one in the center stepped forward, a female, Zelnar guessed, with close-cropped silver hair and eyes as dark and fathomless as space itself. Admiral Helena Reyes, Earth Defense Force. She introduced herself, her expression unreadable. Welcome to New Harmony Station, Ambassador. I understand you've come a long way to ask for our help. Zelnar bowed her head slightly. The situation is dire, Admiral. The Harbingers have destroyed 14 systems already. Trillions are dead. We've exhausted every option. Every option except us. Admiral Rice corrected, her voice carrying an edge that made Zelnar's skin prickle. The species you exiled. The monsters you erased from history. The accusation hung in the air between them. Zelnar had prepared for this, had known that the humans would not have forgotten the injustice done to them. I cannot undo the past, Admiral, she said quietly. I can only speak for the present. And at present, without your help, there will be no future, not for the Concordat, not for anyone. Rice studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward a doorway. The Defense Council is waiting. You'll have 15 minutes to make your case, Ambassador. I suggest you make them count. As they walked through the station's corridors, Zelnar glimpsed a civilization far more advanced than the one the Concordat had banished. Screens displayed ships and weapon systems that dwarfed anything in the Concordat's arsenal. Humans moved with purpose, their technology seamlessly integrated with their environment. You've been preparing, Zelnar observed. All this time, you've been preparing for war. Admiral Rice didn't slow her pace. When you're cast out by a galaxy that fears you, Ambassador, you learn to be ready for the day they come looking for you again. She paused at a massive door. We just didn't expect it would be to beg for salvation. The doors slid open to reveal a circular chamber where 7 humans sat at a curved table, their faces illuminated by holographic displays showing the Void Harbinger's path of destruction. Zelnar recognized the images. Kaveri, Drusus Prime, the Tethys Nebula, all reduced to cosmic ash. Ambassador Zelnar of the Elysian Commonwealth. Admiral Rice announced, here to request Earth's aid against the Void Harbingers. An older human with dark skin and a closely trimmed white beard leaned forward. I am Chairman Elias Cooper. Before you begin, Ambassador, I must ask, do you know why your Concordat feared us so much that they chose to erase us from history? Zelnar hesitated. The true reason had been kept from most citizens, but as an ambassador, she had access to the sealed records. "Your species adapted too quickly," she answered honestly. "You solved problems in ways no one predicted." The Concordat believed that given enough time, humans would become the dominant species in the galaxy. They feared being rendered obsolete. Cooper nodded, seemingly satisfied with her candor. "And now? Now we face actual extinction at the hands of the Harbingers," Selnar replied. "Obsolescence would be a gift compared to that fate." She activated a small projector, displaying the full data on the Harbingers' capabilities and the Concordat's failed defensive strategies. As the Defense Council reviewed the information, their expressions grew grave. "These quantum phase weapons," a woman with neural implants visible at her temples noted. "They bypass all conventional shielding." "Yes," Zellner confirmed. "Our ships are destroyed before they can even engage. The Harbinger's organic vessels seem to adapt to our tactics within minutes." Cooper shared a look with Admiral Reyes. "Sounds familiar." "That's why you're here," Reyes said to Zellner. "Not because we're stronger. Because we think differently." "Because you're human," Zellner nodded. "The very quality the Concordat feared might be the only thing that can save us all." Cooper stood, his decision apparently made. "We will need to verify your information. Admiral Reyes will accompany you back to Concordat space with a reconnaissance team. If things are as dire as you claim, we will consider intervention." It wasn't the immediate commitment Selnar had hoped for, but it was more than she had realistically expected. As she left the chamber with Reyes, the Admiral's expression had softened slightly. 300 years is a long time to bear a grudge, even for humans, Reyes admitted quietly. "But understand this, Ambassador. If we help you, it won't be out of forgiveness. It will be because we haven't changed as much as your Concordat hoped we would. We still can't stand by and watch innocent people die, even if those people once cast us out." As they prepared for departure, Selnar watched through a viewport as human warships began to emerge from hidden docks within Earth's moon. Dark, angular, and bristling with weapons, unlike anything in the Concordat's arsenal, they moved into formation around a massive flagship. "The Defiance," Reyes explained, following Selnar's gaze. "My command vessel. She hasn't seen combat outside of training exercises, but she was built for it." "You maintained a military all this time?" Selnar asked. "Even in isolation?" Reyes laughed, though there was little humor in it. "Ambassador, when the most advanced coalition of species in the galaxy decides you're too dangerous to exist, you don't exactly disarm." She turned to face Selnar fully. "Make no mistake, we didn't spend 3 centuries licking our wounds. We spent them preparing for whatever would come next." As the luminous path prepared to depart, escorted by the Defiance and its battle group, Zellner couldn't help but wonder if the Concordat had made the right decision after all. The humans were indeed dangerous, perhaps more so now than ever before. But as the reports of the Harbinger's advance continued to flood in, another thought occurred to her. Sometimes, the only thing more dangerous than an enemy was a former enemy who might become an ally. And right now, danger was exactly what the galaxy needed. Awakening the sleeping giants. The return journey to Concordat space took half the time Selnar's outbound trip had required. Human hyperspace technology, it seemed, had advanced well beyond what the Concordat had achieved in the centuries since the Purge. Admiral Reyes' flagship, the Defiance, cut through the void with a precision that left Selnar's navigator speechless. "Their drive signatures are unlike anything I've ever seen," the navigator whispered as they observed the human battle group from the Luminous Paths bridge. "They're not just bending space. They're threading through it somehow." Zellner nodded, watching the massive human vessels with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They had 300 years of isolation to develop their technology, and they were always known for their innovation. The journey gave Selnar time to learn more about the humans and what they had become. Admiral Reyes proved surprisingly open to conversation during their shared meals in the Defiance's officers' mess. Perhaps it was confidence, Zellner thought. Or perhaps Reyes simply believed the knowledge no longer needed to be hidden. After the purge, Earth was united by a common purpose, Reyes explained, sipping from a cup of what she called coffee, a bitter stimulant that humans seemed to consume in remarkable quantities. Survival. We knew the Concordat might return one day, either to check on us or to finish what they started. The Concordat never intended to destroy humanity, Zelnar objected. The exile was meant to be permanent, but not fatal. Reyes raised an eyebrow. Tell that to the colonies that were bombarded into submission when they refused to return to Earth. 6 million dead in the Martian massacre alone. Zelnar's inner membranes flickered in distress. The historical records she had accessed had mentioned nothing of this, but she had suspected the official history might be incomplete. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't know." "Few would," Reyes acknowledged. "History is written by the victors, and in this case, the victors wanted us forgotten." She set down her cup. "But we remembered, and we prepared." The human fleet that had accompanied them, 12 ships in total, was, Reyes revealed, merely a small forward reconnaissance group. The true Earth Defense Force consisted of hundreds of vessels, many larger than the Defiance itself, along with countless automated defense platforms and what Reyes cryptically referred to as contingency measures. "You built all this while isolated in a single star system?" Zelnar asked, unable to hide her astonishment. "We expanded cautiously," Reyes corrected. "The barrier shield extends to several nearby stars now. We have mining operations, research outposts, but we've been careful not to draw attention. Until now." As they neared Concordat space, long-range sensors detected the signs of recent destruction. The Harbingers had been busy in Zelnar's absence. 3 more systems had fallen, their populations either destroyed or scattered as refugees. The first Concordat patrol, they encountered nearly opened fire before recognizing the luminous path. Even then, the presence of the human vessels caused immediate panic. Zelnar had to personally intervene to prevent an incident, explaining the situation to increasingly higher-ranked officials until finally, the High Council itself granted them passage to Elysia Prime, where an emergency session had been convened. The arrival of Admiral Reyes and her delegation at the Grand Chamber caused a sensation. Many of the younger representatives had never seen a human before. The older ones watched with thinly veiled apprehension as Reyes strode confidently to the central podium, her uniform stark against the flowing robes of the Concordat representatives. High Counselor Thalius had visibly aged in the short time since Zelnar's departure. The stress of watching the Harbinger's relentless advance had taken its toll. "Admiral Helena Reyes of Earth," he announced, his voice carrying a complex mix of emotions. "We welcome you to the Galactic Concordat." "Do you?" Reyes asked bluntly, her voice echoing through the chamber. 300 years ago, this body voted to erase my species from history. Now you welcome us because you need us. Forgive me if I find your greeting somewhat hollow, Counselor." A murmur ran through the chamber. Thalius's scales flickered in what Zelnar recognized as embarrassment. "The past cannot be undone, Admiral," he conceded. "But the present crisis demands we move beyond old grievances. The Void Harbingers have destroyed 17 systems since their emergence. Trillions are dead or displaced. If they are not stopped, the entire galaxy will fall." Reyes activated a holographic display at the center of the chamber, showing data gathered by her reconnaissance teams. "We've analyzed your encounters with the Harbingers," she stated. "Your tactics are predictable. Your technology is advanced but specialized, optimized for peace, not war. And you still think like a collective, expecting your enemy to behave rationally." She shook her head. "The Harbingers aren't rational. They're predators. And you've forgotten how to fight predators. And humans haven't." A Drusari representative challenge. Reyes's smile was cold. "We've never had the luxury of forgetting. Even in peace, humans prepare for war. It's our nature, the very nature that frightened you so much." The debate that followed was heated. The human delegation presented their analysis of the Harbinger's tactics and their proposed response, a strategy so aggressive that it shocked many of the Concordat representatives. Where the Concordat had focused on defensive measures, trying to protect populated systems, the humans advocated for direct strikes against the Harbinger's supply lines and command structures. You can't defend everywhere at once, Rais argued. You need to take the fight to them, make them respond to you instead of constantly reacting to their movements. Our fleets have tried direct engagement, Thalius countered. They were destroyed. Your fleets used conventional tactics against an unconventional enemy, Rais replied. We won't make that mistake. In the end, desperation again prevailed over caution. The Concordat formally requested Earth's assistance, offering reparations and the restoration of humanity's place in the galactic community. Rais accepted the mission but deferred the political questions to her superiors on Earth. We'll help you stop the Harbingers, she told Thalius. What comes after will depend on how we work together now. As the session concluded, Rais asked for volunteers from the Concordat's military forces, species willing to integrate into human command structures and adapt to their tactics. The response was greater than even Selnar had expected. Many younger officers had grown frustrated with the Concordat's cautious approach and were eager to try something, anything, that might work against the seemingly invincible enemy. On the Defiance's bridge, Rais sent a coded transmission back to Earth. The response came within minutes, a single word that sent a chill down Selnar's spine. Avalanche. Within hours, the barrier shield around Sol system lowered briefly as hundreds of warships emerged from hyperspace at predetermined coordinates throughout Concordat space. They arrived in battle-ready formations, each group targeting a different sector of the Harbinger's advance. This is just the first wave, Rais explained as Selnar watched the tactical display in stunned silence. The Earth Defense Force has been on standby alert since the day you arrived at our doorstep. Ambassador, Chairman Cooper suspected your mission was genuine, but he wanted verification before committing our full strength. And now? Selnar asked. Now we wake the sleeping giants, Rais replied, her eyes fixed on the display as more ships continued to appear. Operation Avalanche is the full mobilization of humanity's military capabilities, something we've trained for, but never actually executed until today. The scale of the human response was beyond anything the Concordat had imagined possible from a single-system civilization, even one as resourceful as humanity. Their ships were diverse in design but unified in purpose, equipped with weapons and defenses that incorporated technologies the Concordat had deemed theoretical at best. You've been watching us, Selnar realized suddenly. All these years, you've been gathering intelligence on the Concordat. Rais didn't deny it. We had to know if you were coming back to finish what you started. Our deep cover agents have been embedded in border worlds for generations, monitoring your technological development, your politics, your military capabilities. And the Harbingers. Did you know about them? No, Rais admitted. They surprised us as much as they surprised you. But unlike the Concordat, we've never stopped preparing for unexpected threats. As the combined fleet prepared for their first coordinated strike against the Harbingers, Selnar was assigned as liaison between the human command and the Concordat forces. It was in this capacity that she found herself on the bridge of the Defiance as Admiral Rais addressed the gathered captains via holographic link. The Harbingers have never faced a force like ours, Rais told them, her voice steady and confident. They've grown accustomed to enemies that retreat, that prioritize evacuation over engagement. We will show them something different. We will show them humanity. The assembled captains, human and alien alike, stood a little straighter at her words. There was something in Rais's presence, Selnar noticed, that inspired confidence even across species barriers. Our first target is the Harbinger fleet currently laying siege to the Targus system, Rais continued, highlighting the location on the tactical display. Intelligence suggests this is one of their primary staging areas, with approximately 80 capital ships and their support vessels. We will hit them with everything we have, focusing fire on their command ships first. She detailed the attack plan, a complex, multi-phase operation that would utilize the unique capabilities of each species involved. The Drusari's stealth technology would allow them to position disruptor beacons throughout the system. The Elysian's psychic navigators would coordinate the timing of the hyperspace jumps to ensure the fleet arrived simultaneously. And the humans' experimental phase shift weapons, developed in secret over decades, would provide the firepower needed to penetrate the Harbinger's defenses. As the meeting concluded and the captains returned to their vessels, Selnar approached Reyes privately. "Your people have agreed to help us despite everything we did to them," she said quietly. "Why?" Reyes considered the question for a moment. "Partly because it's the right thing to do. Partly because fighting is what we're good at." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "And partly because 300 years is long enough to spend in isolation. This war, horrible as it is, gives humanity a chance to rejoin the galaxy, on our terms this time." The fleet entered hyperspace in perfect synchronization. Weapons charge, crews at battle stations. As the blue swirl of hyperspace surrounded the Defiance, Reyes turned to Selnar with a grim smile. "Ambassador, you came to Earth looking for monsters to fight your monsters," she said. "I hope you're prepared for what that actually means." As the human warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation around the unsuspecting Harbinger fleet, Selnar realized that she wasn't prepared, not for the scale of violence humans were capable of, nor for the efficiency with which they delivered it. The Concordat had forgotten what humans were, had convinced themselves that their fears had been exaggerated. Now, watching Admiral Reyes calmly direct an assault of unprecedented ferocity against an enemy that had seemed invincible just days before, Selnar understood that the Concordat's fears had not been exaggerated at all. They had been understated. Clash of civilizations. The Battle of Targus marked a turning point in the war against the Void Harbingers. For the first time since their emergence from the galactic rim, the Harbingers experienced defeat. The combined human Concordat fleet struck with such overwhelming force and tactical precision that the Harbinger response was disorganized and ultimately futile. Selnar watched from the Defiance's tactical center as human warships executed maneuvers that seemed to defy the conventional laws of physics. They attacked in coordinated waves, their weapons synchronized to exploit gaps in the Harbinger's defenses that Concordat analysts hadn't even identified. "They're using the Harbinger's adaptive capabilities against them," explained Commander Lai, Reyes' tactical officer. "Every time they adapt to one attack vector, we switch to another. We're overloading their response mechanisms." The Harbinger's organic ships, massive, tentacled monstrosities that had torn through Concordat defenses with ease, now found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. The human phase shift weapons bypassed their regenerative hulls, striking directly at their vital systems. Within 6 hours, 63 Harbinger vessels had been destroyed or disabled, with minimal losses to the Allied fleet. The remainder retreated in disarray, something no Concordat force had ever witnessed before. As the battle concluded, Selnar joined Admiral Reyes on the bridge as damage reports and casualty figures streamed in. Despite the victory, Reyes' expression remained somber. 17 ships lost, over 2,000 personnel, she noted, studying the data. "Not insignificant, but far better than our projections." The Concordat would have considered such losses catastrophic, Selnar observed. "We've become accustomed to peace. Our tolerance for casualties is limited." Reyes looked up, her dark eyes searching Selnar's face. "That's why you lost ground so quickly. War demands sacrifice. The Harbingers understood that. You didn't." The fleet regrouped, repaired what damage they could, and prepared for the next phase of the campaign. Word of the victory at Targus spread rapidly throughout Concordat space, raising morale and inspiring hope for the first time since the Harbingers had appeared. But the human commanders warned against overconfidence. The Harbingers had been surprised at Targus, caught unprepared by tactics they had never encountered before. They would adapt, learn, and return with new strategies of their own. 3 days later, they did exactly that. The Harbinger counterattack came at Proxima Centauri, one of the human expansion systems adjacent to Sol. They struck with a force twice the size of the one defeated at Targus, using new weapons that seemed specifically designed to counter the human phase shift technology. They're fast learners, Rise admitted as she studied the battle reports. But so are we. The second major engagement of the war was fought on much more equal terms. The Harbingers had clearly analyzed the Targus defeat and adjusted their tactics accordingly. They no longer presented easy targets for the Allied fleet's coordinated strikes, instead dispersing their forces and attacking from multiple vectors simultaneously. What followed was a brutal war of attrition that lasted for 16 days, the longest continuous space battle in recorded history. The human Concordat alliance suffered heavy losses, but the Harbingers paid an even higher price for each system they attacked. It was during this protracted engagement that Selnar began to understand the true nature of human warfare. Where Concordat strategy emphasized precision and efficiency, human tactics embraced chaos and unpredictability. Where Concordat commanders sought to minimize casualties, human officers were willing to accept significant losses to achieve strategic objectives. And perhaps most disturbingly, the humans seemed to grow more effective as the situation deteriorated. Individual ship captains showed remarkable initiative, adapting to changing battlefield conditions without waiting for orders from Central Command. Ground forces displayed a level of tenacity that shocked even veteran Concordat observers, fighting on despite injuries that would have incapacitated most species. "It's not that we enjoy suffering," Commander Lai explained when Selnar questioned this phenomenon. "It's that we've evolved to endure it." Historically, humans who gave up at the first sign of adversity didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. After the Proxima Centauri campaign, the war settled into a pattern: advance, engage, retreat, regroup. Both sides continuously adapted their tactics and technologies, but the element of surprise that had made the Targus victory so decisive was gone. Now it was a test of resources, resilience, and resolve. 6 months into the war, the Harbingers launched a desperate assault on the Elysian homeworld, Selnar's own people. It was a calculated move, targeting the species most closely associated with the human alliance in an attempt to break the Concordat's renewed morale. The battle for Elysia Prime became the defining moment of the conflict. Admiral Rise committed nearly half of Earth's total military strength to the defense of a world that had once voted for humanity's erasure from galactic memory. Why? Selnar asked her as they watched the massive fleet assemble. "You owe us nothing. Certainly not this level of commitment." Reyes's response was simple: "Because this is who we are, Ambassador. Not the monsters you feared, but the allies you needed all along." The Harbinger force that arrived at Elysia Prime was the largest yet encountered, nearly 300 capital ships and countless smaller vessels. They came with a new weapon, a planet killer that had been used to devastating effect against lesser worlds on the galactic rim. The battle that ensued would later be called the Miracle of Elysia by the Concordat media. Human ships formed a living shield between the Harbingers and the planet, absorbing fire meant for the civilian population below. Concordat vessels, inspired by this sacrifice, fought with unprecedented determination alongside their human allies. For 3 days, the space around Elysia Prime blazed with weapons fire and the death throes of ships from all 3 civilizations. The Harbingers pressed their numerical advantage relentlessly, but the human Concordat line held. On the 4th day, when defeat seemed all but certain, Admiral Rise executed what would become known as the Sol Gambit, a maneuver so audacious that even her own captains questioned her sanity when the orders came through. The Allied fleet, which had been fighting in standard formation, suddenly broke apart into dozens of smaller battle groups. Each group activated their hyperspace drives simultaneously, jumping to seemingly random coordinates around the Harbinger fleet. Before the Harbingers could react to this bizarre tactic, Each battle group dropped a payload of experimental devices that the humans had been developing in secret, quantum disruptors that created localized distortions in the fabric of space-time itself. The effect was catastrophic for the Harbingers. Their organic ships, which relied on a form of quantum entanglement for their remarkable regenerative capabilities, began to collapse in on themselves as the very laws of physics were temporarily rewritten around them. Within hours, the largest Harbinger fleet ever assembled had been reduced to scattered remnants, retreating in disarray toward the galactic rim. Elysia Prime, though scared by orbital bombardment, remained intact. The cost had been staggering. Nearly 40% of the human force had been destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Concordat losses were even higher. But for the first time, the tide of the war had definitively turned. In the aftermath, as rescue operations continued and damage assessments poured in, Selnar found Admiral Reyes in her private quarters aboard the Defiance, which had survived the battle but bore the scars of multiple direct hits. "The quantum disruptors," Selnar said without preamble. "You had them all along, didn't you? Why wait until now to use them?" Reyes looked up from the casualty reports she'd been reviewing, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep.